Hello, I'm Rob, and welcome to the Uncut Network. Every month we rotate between directors, actors, and super specific genres. We cover everything from exploitation to things your parents will absolutely approve of, relative unknowns to household names, and everything in between. The Uncut Network is the movie podcast of all the nations that cover all those things and more. And I really need to reword that because in this case it's a bonus episode. It's not a traditional episode. We're doing a now new thing, I guess. An annual tradition of a Frightfest special. And to do that, I am joined by Kat. Hello there.
Hello.
Amber. Bel.
Hi.
And joining us for the first time is Becky. Hello there.
Hiya, thank you for having me.
A pleasure. Okay, this is a loaded question because I know you're all sort of in recovery mode, but how are you all doing?
I feel like I am maybe one of the better off both. I haven't been sick yet, but I do feel a scratchiness in my throat. So, that's probably not a good sign. But I know some other people were much worse off than I.
Yeah, I felt more human. Let's just say it that way. Like I didn't even do the full festival either, so I felt massive FOMO from leaving on the Sunday. But I got home and I was like, oh, I'm not feeling that great, and then it just felt like I got hit by a truck, so I had to take like 2 days off work. So that was fun. But yeah, I've been better, but it was 100% worth it. So if this is the consequence you pay for doing Frightfest, I'll do it every year.
Yeah, I'm fine so far, touch wood, but I wasn't in the screen nearly as much as everybody else. So I think that has saved me in this thing. Because 5 days breathing the same air as a load of strangers at varying degrees of health, not sleeping, not eating great, it's not good.
No.
Yeah, I was much the same. I feel terrible after the end of it. I've definitely caught something off the many people in the screen, but like Belle said, it was definitely worth it for the experience of the weekend. I'd definitely take a couple of days feeling down for how good the weekend was.
Last time we did this episode, I'm pretty sure I had COVID because I said about 6 words in a 3-hour recording. So it's already better than last year's. And last year's, because of my, ill health, I think we recovered every single movie. So I think It was near enough 3 hours long.
Yes, we literally went day by day, film by film, commenting. And bless Mike, he had only been there for the 1 day, and he sat there through me and Pope just talking through every single film. But yeah, so let's not do that this year.
No, bit more of a simple setup this year. So just go through it day by day. Starts on Thursday, so we'll talk about the highlights of every day, and at the end we'll sort of loop around and talk about the festival as a whole and things that might not have been highlights, things that, just talking about the festival in general. So, Thursday, the highlights of Thursday.
I mean, I think we all have a shared
Who wants to say
highlight. But there was 5 films that played on Thursday, and whilst I'm sure some of the others were fine, I think we're all here to talk about Suitable Flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
All I know is it's really horny, and that's all I know about it.
It was genuinely really fantastic. Not just because it's horny. That does help, obviously, but I thought it was a really good film. I thought it was a perfect opening night film. It was funny, it was gory, it was sleazy. It was just a fucking blast all around, to be honest.
Is that the opening movie?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's an up from last year's, which was a
The
Neil
Lair.
Marshall.
Oh, love that.
A definite up from the Lair, I would say.
What are anybody else's thoughts on Suitable Flesh? Horny. We've got that.
I loved
covered.
it. It was ridiculous horny, but also really great performances from Barbara Crampton, Heather Graham, and Judah Lewis in it as well, which I'd only previously seen in The Babysitter, but in this, he really, really stole the show, being able to portray so many different sort of personalities without straying into spoiler territory. To be able to sort of embody so many characters. He was just fascinating to watch. And the same with Heather Graham in it as well. And also Barbara Crampton. We don't see her too much in the film compared to everyone else, but she's just an icon. She's just captivating in every scene she's in. So the 3 lead characters in it, it's hard to pick between them who was the best to watch. So between all the ridiculousness in the plot, we also had some really solid performances to sort of anchor it. So it was just an all-round great watch.
Yeah, it was. I feel like I haven't seen Heather Graham in anything for a while as well. And I mean, I don't know her filmography massively, but I feel like I haven't seen her in anything horror. Has she ever been in like anything horror before? Probably.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, she's a horror icon, our Barbara Crampton.
No, Heather Graham.
Heather Graham,
not
sorry.
Babs. Not Babs. I know Babs.
There's what I can't remember. It's called something like Possessed or Bedeviled or something. But there's definitely a DVD where she's on the front cover, pregnant and holding her baby, and that's like some sort of Rosemary's Baby ripoff, from what I remember.
I love that.
Well, I caught it out of Tribeca, and so it's directed by Joe Lynch. It is dedicated to Stuart Gordon, and follows his. It follows in Gordon's routine of modernising a Lovecraft story. So this is Lovecraft's The Thing on the Doorstep, which is 2 male protagonists, and this is obviously like 2 female protagonists. So they've done the gender swap, they've modernised it. There's a lovely little cameo from Graham Skipper, who's a Frightfest regular normally, and everybody like Barbara and Graham and a lot of the writers and cast and crew all worked with Stuart Gordon. So this was a real sort of like love letter to the late great director.
For me, like the horniness alone is one of the highlights of this film. But seconding what Becky was saying, it's also like really grounded performances from all of the characters throughout. And I don't know, they're just, even though there's none of the characters are like explicitly, I guess, queer on screen or anything like that, the film just has an inherent queerness in it.
Okay. I guess the question you got to ask about any opening movie, does it sort of set the stall for what's to come? Is it like this is the tone of what's going to happen in the next couple of days? Or is it basically an anomaly?
For me, it was, I think, a hopeful, is this what we're in for the rest of the weekend? And then I think because it was such a strong opener, a lot of films didn't live up to it. So I don't know, it's a weird balance, and like with the perfect way to start such a fun weekend, but then you're comparing every other film you're watching to it, and nothing could hold a candle to it because they were all so different.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I do think it was quite an anomaly in the programming. There was nothing that really felt like it, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. With some films, there was a lot of variety to really cater to different horror fans, which is great. But then I also agree with Belle that there were some duds in comparison to it as well, especially on the first day. I don't feel like anything really lived up to Suitable Flesh for me.
Yeah, it was immediately followed by The Dive and Cheat, which are both quite slow. So you've kind of pumped the audience up with Suitable Flesh, and then it was just an immediate like plummet down, especially on that first night.
And what else did play on that first day? Just out of curiosity.
So it was The Dive, which is 2 sisters get trapped in there's a little landslide above ground. They get trapped underwater while they're cave diving. And Cheat was like a really slow ghost slasher story. And then in the other screen, there was Punch, which is a British set slasher with the killers wearing a Punch from Punch and Judy mask. And then there was an anthology called Law. So I guess the Discovery screen was better at bringing those energy levels, but most people just stayed in the first screen for the first night.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty bad programming, really. I mean, that's to relate to sort of like a music festival. You want your headliner on last. You want people to go home on a buzz, on a high.
I think I'm the Dive defender. I actually enjoyed The Dive, but I did think it was a really strange opening night movie. Like Kat said, it was very slow. And to come straight off like something really fun and original like Suitable Flesh, and then just go straight into The Dive, which was basically like The Descent and Fall and what's that one where they're like trapped in the swimming pool and it's 2 sisters, like all of those type of things, and it just felt like a little bit, I don't know, it just felt like a little bit of a disappointment to come straight off of Suitable Flesh into The Dive. But I actually liked it. I'm a Dive defender.
Yeah, I didn't hate the dive, but I didn't like it as much as Suitable Flesh. I did feel like I agree. Coming down off that for sort of quite a soothing, lots of sea sounds, lots of sort of murky lighting compared to Suitable Flesh, which lots of like spinning cameras, saxophone solos, lots of ridiculous things happening on screen. It was definitely quite jarring. I think it probably would have worked better with Suitable Flesh being last. But then also a lot of people are tired from sort of travelling on the Thursday as well. So I'm sort of glad that it did come first so I could watch it, really enjoy it, and then sort of take everything in afterwards.
That'd just be terrible for me, because for a while the only way I could get to sleep is by watching sort of coast videos on YouTube, like 12-hour long coast videos, like sea sounds. So that'd just be the worst.
It was very relaxing. It was very ASMR-y. I think the dive was the last one I did because I was very tired after that, and it was really like beautiful. It was really relaxing, like the sun like glimmering on the ocean. But yeah, it just felt a bit derivative. And what I don't understand is, why is it always two women in this situation? Like, why have we never got films where it's like two brothers that go off and are stupid enough to get themselves trapped in like an ice box or something? Like, it's always two women. And Liz said something very, very smart. She said this would never happen to women because women would never get themselves in that situation. And I have to agree.
It seems like sort of a surfer bra situation.
Right. Like, I would like to see like two men get themselves in a stupid, completely avoidable situation, because let's be real, that's probably more likely to happen.
It's what we do.
Well, there's a reason we live longer.
Okay. So first full day, I guess it'd be now. Friday.
Yeah, I'll jump in first for Friday. The highlight for me would probably be New Life. It's one from John Rosman, I think is the director's name. It's like his new feature, and it's like a really interesting new kind of twist on the whole type of zombie story. And I think it does it really interestingly, has really captivating characters, and I really just enjoyed how it looked. See, that stood out for me as a Friday one. But then also as well, Where the Devil Roams, like that was my first Addams Family picture. I'd never seen any film from them, but I know everyone raves about them, and yeah.
I feel like you really have to put a huge caveat there, because when you say the Addams Family, people think,
no, not the Ookie and Kooky. Well, I guess maybe a bit, but no.
A single D, Adam, not the double D.
Yeah.
Film that kind of follows a family of like, I don't know, what do you want, like circus performers, or almost like kind of like freak show performers type thing, like, you know, traveling kind of circus people who go on a murder spree, and the film also like kind of deals with untangling PTSD and trauma. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean the hit rate they have and the speed that they make things, it's like once a year. It's pretty stellar stuff.
Once a year, they write it, they direct it, they do the soundtrack, they do the set design, they do the costume. It's fucking amazing.
Music as well.
Big music, everything.
Hellbender. The music they did in that was really cool.
Yeah, so good. And it was so nice to see, obviously, because I do think I love that they're kind of like, obviously they're indie filmmakers still. They're still working with these like smaller budgets, but the creativity that comes out of them. I've never seen a film like Where the Devil Roams. I can 100% say that with certainty. I've never seen anything that reminded me of it or made me think of it. It was completely original. And I just can't wait to see. I would like to see them with like a huge budget, but also I love the creativity that comes with them having the smaller budget. But I want them to blow up and be massively successful and world famous. So yeah.
Yeah, I get that. But while we're on your Amber, highlights for the Friday?
Yeah, so for me it was Where the Devil Roams was a highlight. I have to give a shout out to the J Horror Virus by Jasper Sharp and Sarah Appleton. I actually sadly didn't get to see it at the fest, but I saw it beforehand because I'm a J Horror obsessive, as you might know. And the minute I heard about this documentary, I knew I had to become immediately obsessed with it, and I did. They did such a fantastic job, and I'm really gutted I didn't get to see their Q&A. but they're such lovely people, and so I'm so happy to see this little subgenre that not a lot of people maybe know about get like a really cohesive English language documentary about it, because it's fully, it's like the only thing that really exists in the space of English language, but it has all the masters in it. You know, it's got Kurosawa in it, it's got Tsukamoto in it, it's got Noroi Suruta in it, it's got like the whole gang. The whole gang is there. And I just loved it. It was great fun. I'm so happy to see it. Like the reactions of people coming out after seeing it. So yeah, big fan of that one.
I have to ask, I saw the one they did previously, the found footage one, and I mean this with all the love in the world, but it could have also been a podcast, because it was.
I get what you mean. Yeah. I get what you mean. I think that's kind of that is kind of the nature of documentaries, I think. And I will say, especially with a subgenre like J-horror, I don't know where that came from. Sorry, I was so excited.
You're so cultured.
A subgenre like J-horror is, by its very nature, it is a slow, quiet, subtle horror, and a lot of the directors as well, you know, being these older Japanese men, are quite, you know, Kiyoshi Kurosawa is like so eloquent and gorgeously spoken, but quite quiet, quite softly spoken. So I will say I can understand maybe people thinking that it could have been a podcast, but for me...
No, I mean, in the case of found footage, the found footage experience, I think it was called, it was just such a... It's a visual medium, and they didn't really make a visual movie. I mean, you could have got exactly the same experience. Nothing was added by it being a visual experience. It was just, you could have listened to them talk for 90 minutes and you got the same result at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could, if you thought that, you could make the same argument for the J-horror virus. I personally wouldn't, because I like seeing the clips, and with something like the J-horror virus as well, they go into like the mythologies behind the yokai spirits and the onryo, which is a very physical thing, and they have the actress that plays Sadako and Kayako, and you really need to see their like creepy body movements for that. So I think this one like really benefited from the clips, and they actually showed a few clips and movies from things that I had actually never heard of, which for someone as like hyper obsessed as me was really cool to see.
Cool. Moving to Kat then. Friday highlights.
So I'm going to sort of echo Bel with New Life. I caught it out of Fantasia, and it's the hardest film to review because you can't say anything about it without risking spoiling it, because it's one film until a certain point when it becomes a completely different film.
Okay.
It's a feature debut. John is a lovely director. He was there a weekend. They had a very interesting marketing campaign for their film. They had like missing dog posters everywhere, which we were talking about, and we either thought someone's lost their dog or it was for Good Boy, which was playing on the Monday, but no, it was for New Life. So that was strange. Again, Where the Devil Roams, I am Team Adams and have been since The Deeper You Dig. Hellbender is my favourite. I don't think this one for me reached Hellbender, but I still really enjoyed what they did, and it has got one hell of a final image. It's like, did I just see what I think I saw? And apparently we did.
Oh, yeah.
And then for films that we haven't mentioned, What You Wish For by Nicholas Tomney. Again, it's one that you should know not much about, but it stars Nick Stahl as a sous chef who finds himself in a spot of bother when he agrees to cater a private dining experience. It really took me by surprise when I watched it. I wasn't expecting it to go quite where it went, and Nick Stahl is so good in it. And my final highlight, slightly biased because I did the intro and the Q&A for it, but it's an animation called The Weird Kids by Zach Passero.
I've seen that one as well, yeah.
It's like a coming-of-age 80s animation B-movie, prepubescent boys and older siblings and girlfriends go into the desert camping and stumble across a strange monster, and it's like them versus the monster, but then there's like some other stuff happening. It was actually like really emotional and nostalgic. And there was one point in the film where I was in tears and I didn't understand why I was in tears. Literally the first 5 minutes is just the characters constantly calling each other ball sacks. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna hate this. And then like minute 30, I'm like, why am I crying? So yeah, that one really sort of like stood out to me.
Yeah, a big sweetheart of a movie that the characters would just do absolutely anything for each other, and it's just so genuine and humble. I mean, I think people might be put off by the art style. That seems to be sort of the advanced word from elsewhere in the world. But
yeah, it does take a little bit of getting used to, about 10, 15 minutes, and then it sort of clicks into place. But it's made by two people. It's made by Zach, who wrote it, and he animated everything hand-drawn onto a tablet. And then his wife painted all the backgrounds. They did it over 9 years. And there was one point where they'd got so far, and then because he's an editor by trade, he's edited all of Lucky McKee's films and a load of other stuff. And he got so far, he went on a seminar and learned a new animation style. And about 4 years in, he just went back to the beginning and started going over everything with the new things that he'd learned. And even the version that screened at Frightfest had a prologue added to it. So the Frightfest audience were the first audience in the world to see an 80-second prologue set 25 years earlier. And that was because he was like, I want to make something. And the producer and him were talking, we're like, well, should we make something new? And he's like, no, why don't we make something for this to sort of explain it a little bit better for the audience? So yeah, this is a film that I don't think he's ever going to stop tinkering with. It's going to be...
It's a really nice movie. Yeah. Becky, Friday highlights.
Yeah, so I'm echoing quite a lot of what everyone else said. Obviously, Where the Devil Roams was definitely one of my favourites. I do love the Addams films already. We got the pleasure, like myself, Kat and Amber, spoke to the family on the media wall beforehand, and I don't know what they thought as well, but definitely speaking to them and hearing the love they have for each other and how much they love working with each other, to then watch the film and see how they interact and see all the obvious passion that went into making the film, just really elevated it for me, seeing that it really was like a labour of love. It's something they love doing together, and that's why they produce so many films together. They just enjoy coming up with these ideas and making these films, and it felt like a real pleasure and a real intimate thing to be able to sort of be included in that, be included in such an important family activity to them, to then show in front of hundreds of people. I don't know, it just felt really, really special. And like Kat said, the final scene in it is definitely something I didn't expect to see, and I love my films to shock me, so to hear people in the screen gasp, it was just fantastic. And then also, yeah, the J horror virus was another one that I really, really enjoyed. I'm the total opposite to Amber. Like, J horror really is quite a blind spot for me in my film knowledge. So to go into it, I thought it was perfect for people who know a lot about J horror, but also for people who don't, to really explain where it comes from, how these people know each other, how they all went to school together and studied with each other and try and constantly want each other's creations, to hear about like sort of the community around the film, both in Japan but then also worldwide as well, like the J horror fans that consume it. I thought it was really, really interesting and really lovingly created as well.
Yeah, looking forward to that one, just so the wider world knows how much of a sweetheart Shinya Tsukamoto is.
Oh my God, mate, when I tell you, when he came on screen, I literally, like, when I saw what happened on screen, I was like, oh my God, it's Shinya. Like, I was like a full-on like boy band fangirl. He's so cute. I love it. And they said, like, I got to speak to them a bit, and they said obviously everyone was a total sweetheart, but they almost didn't get Shinya because apparently he was very it was like during still when COVID was still going on in Japan, and he was very, very scared about COVID still, but bless him, he like overcame that fear because he really wanted to be part of the documentary. So big love for Shin. Love it.
So moving to Saturday, Bel.
Yeah, so Saturday was the day I saw the most films out of my entire weekend there. I think I saw a total of 5. Yeah, I saw 5 on Saturday, so I just went film. Highlights for me, I did think this was the wrong place to have it in the schedule of the day, but the film Monolith, that's I just really vibed with it. Single location horror film that has just one kind of actress on screen, which is your one Lily Sullivan from Evil Dead Rise. And yeah, I thought it was an interesting enough film, interesting kind of central kind of mystery to it, and I thought it did a good job of telling the story and making you kind of feel a bit unease throughout it. But it shouldn't have been a 10:45 a.m. screening like after like 2 days of people doing Frightfest, because it was hard to stay awake, but not because of the film, just because of the time. But then other highlights for me were Cobweb. Just I can see that easily becoming an annual Halloween rewatch for me. It was just exactly what I wanted from that film.
That's the Anthony Starr one, isn't it?
Anthony Starr and Lizzie Kaplan, just both unhinged, and they know exactly what film they're in, and I love it. It was just exactly what I wanted. And like, caveat for people going in, far more kind of like alleged and also on screen child abuse than I expected going into the film. It was not something I expected, but overall it's a very well done film, competently made. And then the last kind of highlight for me is technically not really horror, but more just like so brutalistic in its violence that it can slide into horror. But the action film Farang, I loved it. It was I don't know, it just had that vibe of like, you know, those original kind of like classic kind of like 80s action films that have that, like, you know, of like, there's this father who's like a reluctant father but now has to rescue like his daughter or child and just basically kills multiple people to get there. That's kind of essentially what the film is. It's not doing anything new, it's not turning the wheel, but it does it well.
French, that one?
Yes, Xavier Gems. Yes.
Oh, he's been sort of I wouldn't say absent, but he kind of goes through spells of being amazing, and then he does The Divide, and then amazing, and then nothing. It's nice to see him back.
Yeah, so
but going back to Monolith, the actor who was in Evil Dead Rise, who was it? Because I'm not great with actor names.
Lily
in Evil Dead.
Oh, she plays Beth, the sister of Maggot Mummy.
Oh, okay. It's just a great year for everybody in that movie. It's such a coming out party, Evil Dead Rise, and people hate it. They're wrong, but you know, that's fine. Other opinions are allowed. Okay, so Amber, Saturday
for me started off really strong and then progressively got worse, and I don't know how mean we want to be on this pod, so I'm going to just keep the positives. So we started Saturday morning with Junta Yamaguchi's River, which had an intro from our lovely cat here, and me and Becky were lucky enough to get a ticket thanks to Third Window. Ben from Third Window had couple of extra tickets, so me and Becky went in, which was so lovely for a Saturday morning. Can I just say, it was like, it might seem like a bit of a strange choice for Frightfest, this film, because it's not in any way, shape or form a horror, but I guess it is a genre. It is like sci-fi adjacent, but it was just so friggin' heartwarming and lovely. And I've actually not seen Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes.
It's wonderful.
It's on my
sort of
list
things.
now because everyone said it's like Kat, you said in your intro, it's like a companion piece. So I know now I have to see it. But honestly, River was just like the most gorgeous, like, oh, I just love it. It was like a gorgeous little snowy Japanese village, and it was just like really funny. It was so funny. All the characters were really sweet, and the whole audience was like in hysterics, and it was really like lovely. Everyone was really teary at the end, and it was like the perfect. Everyone was a bit fragile on Saturday, so it was like the perfect Saturday morning movie because it was slow and cute, but it wasn't like boring, shall we say. No one was falling asleep.
If it's anything like Beyond the Infant 2 Minutes, that's far from boring. It's just a sweetheart, adorable. I mean, I've said that a lot today, and I don't mean to condescend to movies.
But it was adorable. It was really heartwarming. It was really sincere. It's so nice to see a film that is really sincere, because I think a lot of films these days are always doing like this knowing wink to the audience, like, oh, I don't really have feelings, like feelings are not cool. And this film's like, no, like love is really important and we should be kind to each other. It was really
it was so heartwarming. So many people walked out with just a huge smile plastered on their face, us included. So it was a lovely little pick-me-up. Nice way to start the Saturday.
Absolutely.
All downhill after that.
So after that for me was Cobweb, which I did enjoy. I did think Cobweb suffered from this thing that I think most modern US I know that Samuel Bowden isn't American, but like I guess quote unquote blockbuster horrors suffer from, is that they show too much of whatever it is. I think everything is scarier when you can't see what it is. And the minute you show me some CGI thing, I lose interest completely. But having said that, it really it went in a direction I kind of didn't expect it to go in. Like Belle said, it was a lot more brutal than I thought it would be in terms of like the way the kid is treated in it. Lizzie Kaplan and Angie Starr are fantastic. Angie Starr is terrifying in it. And I really like, I think, is she called Cleopatra Coleman?
Yes.
Who's in Infinity Pool. She was great. Like, and I had only seen her in Infinity Pool where I was very annoyed and jealous of her because she's married to Alex Skarsgård. So it was nice to like root for her for once.
Okay. So, Kat, continuing on with Saturday.
So I only actually saw one film at Frightfest because I saw a lot of stuff before Frightfest, and that film was Farang, and I'm very glad that it was the film that I saw at the festival. It's probably one of my films of the festival. So you were saying that Xavier has sort of disappeared for a while, but he's been making the TV show Gangs of London.
I had no idea about that.
And Farang is basically that with the plot of something like John Wick or an 80s Jean-Claude Van Damme film set in Thailand.
Is that the one that I think Gareth Evans did the first season?
Yeah, it was Xavier Evans and Corin Hardy. And it has Farang has the same action designer, Jude Poyer, that they had in Gangs of London. So the action there's a scene in the lift which is just amazing. It's one of these action films where people are being like stabbed in the arm with a machete, and then they're just using that machete to then like take down another bad guy whilst it's still like embedded in their arm. It's like super violent and just, I'm a horror girl, but I'm also like an action revenge thriller girl. So this was like the perfect marriage for me. My other highlights, The Moor, which was a First Blood film set on the Yorkshire moors, but it mixes true crime and found footage and a lot of emotion. It's quite a slow film, but I kind of feel like it needs that to sort of stew in the melancholy and grief. And the cinematography is beautiful. I mean, the moors, Yorkshire moors are beautiful, and this film captures that. And also made me a little bit more scared of sheep than I was expecting to. There's a really creepy shot of some sheep at nighttime, and they've like got their eyes shut or they've got no eyes or something, and they don't look normal.
I live in Yorkshire, don't tell me that.
Don't go to the moors, Amber. Stay away from the moors.
Lived in Yorkshire all my life. The moors are terrifying.
We are screwed.
I can throw a stone about a mile that way, and that's where I am, basically, in where the moor is. Set that sort of place.
It's what the film like taps into is the fact, because I know a lot of people who live close to the moors and stuff, and there is something about them that is creepy and does make people wary. Like you grow up as a child sort of being told by your parents don't go like onto the moors, and then that sort of like stays with you. And I think that Chris Cronin and Paul Thomas, the writer, really sort of captured that eeriness of it.
I've seen that too, and it's got one of a few scenes in there. I think one of them was an award winner at the Empire Awards.
Total Film.
That's the one, yes. They called it the 555 scene. I'm assuming it's the bit in the tent, which
I
is.
haven't seen it yet.
I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just saying the bit in the tent is very scary, but the bit
I'm like too scared to get through it.
It's got a great final shot. The final scene is very, very scary, and it was kind of a oh shit sort of ending, and that's the best sort of ending you want for a horror movie, I think.
100%.
Yeah, that was when because I spoke to Chris when he read the first script, the first treatment. It was that final scene that hooked him and made him want to do the script. And like a lot of other stuff changed before that in the script, but he kept the ending as it was in the original version, and it definitely works. And I guess my final highlight is Transmission. I wanted to stay for it, but I was very tired. It's basically like you're sat watching late night TV, flicking through the channels, and then as the film progresses, you realise that these programs are all interconnected. So you're not watching a documentary and a crap sci-fi film or a cheesy like teen comedy. They are all interconnected in some way. And I just thought it was genius. I mean, I remember trying to like write my notes, and I was basically writing down what program we were watching, so that when I did my review, I could understand like the narrative, and that nearly sent me mad. So I had no idea how the director Michael Hurst managed to like figure this riddle out and put it onto screen.
It's really cool screenwriting trick, that I think, where I imagine they need like a crazy wall full of like string and notes, just to figure it all out. And it's really clever script, that.
And also, the director grew up with a lot of previous Frightfest alum. So he grew up with Johannes Roberts, who directed 47 Meters Down, and was it The Knock Behind there was The Other Side of the Door, I think it's called. Howard J. Ford, who had The Dead and The Ledge play, and like some director called Ben Wheatley.
Some guy.
They all grew up. They all went to college together. Like he helped Ben Wheatley make his first like student film at college, and it's just very strange that there's all these people that sort of all grew up together, and they've all at some point in their career have gone through Frightfest. He was very excited to be sort of the last of his friends to make it.
Very small. It's a big world out there, but it's also very, very small, a horror community.
Yeah,
quite nice that. And Becky.
So after River, after such like a nice start to the day, my day was just full of parental anxiety. Just lots of horror films about children and horrible things happening to children, which was great because I travelled to London with my 2 children for Frightfest. They went around London with my husband. So I was just seeing them between screenings, just like feed the youngest and look at them. So my Saturday was full of horrifying scenes of children. The Moor being one of them. That was definitely one of my highlights. I loved how it sort of blended the true crime element, but then also the supernatural elements, and then how it sort of lamented on the grief of losing a child and seeing the parents dealing with that. I thought their reactions to it, how somber and matter-of-fact they were, was very chilling. There's no moments where you really see people really losing it, screaming and crying. It's that sort of silent recognition of what they're going through that I thought was so haunting alongside the actual scenes of horror in the film. I think it's one of the longest films I saw at Frightfest, but it was definitely one of the ones that gripped me from start to finish. I didn't find myself sort of drifting out or checking my phone or anything like that, because it's not one I saw on the big screen either. It's one I saw on a screener. Similarly, Farang was another one of my highlights. Really enjoyed how violent it was. But then I did think it was very heartfelt at parts as well. Like when he doesn't know where his daughter is, you see this big, strong, like burly lead actor kicking the shit out of all these people to get to his daughter and then breaking down in tears constantly as well. It was a really interesting look at masculinity and parenthood in the film as well. And then my other highlight of the day, which I know had been sort of hit and miss with a lot of audiences, but I really enjoyed Pandemonium, which played on the big screen, which was from French director and artist Quarks, which was sort of a lamentation on like the Seven Rings of Hell and Dante's Inferno. It starts with 2 men that are in a car crash, and then they wake up and they've realised that they didn't survive the car crash, and then they go to hell and they relive the stories of the other tortured souls that are in hell. I do think it could have done with maybe another story in there. You follow like 2 stories in it. I think it could have maybe done with a third to really like get into like it's the really dark, gritty elements. But what it did show, I thought was very, very effective for me, especially because again, it deals with children in the narrative. One more murderous, one that's a lot more sort of sad, more like sad and grief in it. And I thought they were very effective. I was in tears watching it in the second story. It really, really hit me, putting myself in that mother's situation with her daughter. I just thought it was absolutely heartbreaking.
I forgot about Pandemonium, and I enjoyed it. And the more I think about it, the more I actually do enjoy it, because one of the things that I didn't like about it initially was that I was confused and I didn't know how to feel, because it goes, without spoilers, it starts off quite dark but a little silly, then it goes really fantastical, then it is like the bleakest, most horrible thing you've ever seen, and then it finishes off really, really silly again and almost like a fantasy horror. Which when I came out of it, I was in a bad mood because I was like, I don't know how to feel and I don't like this. But the more I think about it, the more I respect that, because like that's what good films should be. They should make you like all go all over the place. And that bleak bit is friggin' bleak as well.
It really was a lot on a Saturday when everyone's quite tired from the night before. It was a lot to sort of sit there and watch so much so much cruelty. Like, there's no relief in it. There's a little bit of comic relief. Then when you look back at it, you're laughing at something that really isn't that funny. It's just funny compared to the really horrible stuff that's happening. It's comic relief that you're laughing at something awful in a sea of other really awful things.
Yeah,
But,
it's that French humor, isn't it? Where you're like, oh God, I really should not be laughing at this,
Yeah.
but it's hilarious.
It really does.
It's the European humor.
It really does fit in well with a lot of other like really fantastic French horror films, which I do find are often very, very bleak.
Us horror fans are a weird bunch, aren't we, when we find things like funny? It's like a friend, I guess we'll call him, was saying, I hate to bring it back to Evil Dead Rise, that there's no comedy in it.
Oh,
That's
I
a weird
disagree.
take. And it's like the 2013 one, there was a bit that I found very, very funny, and I think that might be a sign that I'm maybe gone too far. It's like a bit where she cuts her arm off of a meat cleaver and she's, that feels much better. It's just a little thing like that relieving yourself by cutting your arm off. It's just, find that funny. We're a weird bunch.
Oh no, we were all laughing at it. I suppose I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but on the Sunday with Piper, people were laughing.
Oh my God.
60 seconds in when a kid's killed, there were people cheering and laughing in the big screen. It is that sort of ridiculousness of Frightfest, a ridiculousness of the horror audience.
Delirious.
We own it, though. We own it. It's the Disney fans that you got to be worried about, because they're the really dark ones. Not saying anything, though. Not saying anything. So on to Sunday, yes, Bel.
Well, I didn't actually do any films itself on Sunday because when I booked everything for Frightfest, I was not aware that it goes all the way till Monday, so I only did the day passes for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I flew home on Sunday. But I did see the absolutely fantastic Piper via screener, and this is... It feels like it's a film that was made for me. Like, I'm just like maybe it helped, like, through the advice of a few others. I did indulge in some smoking before watching the film, and I think that really helped. But I don't want to go into too much detail about this film, if you can, but basically the highlights for me are an incredibly, like, over-the-top performance from Liz Hurley, who just, like, knows what type of ridiculous film she's in, and then her character just refuses to ever finish conversations. Like, there'll be numerous conversations where she just either runs away, cycles away, walks away, while someone asks her a question, and I'm just like...
That was just Liz Hurley.
Yeah, I just like, I want to carry that energy into my daily life. Just be like, you know what, I don't need to be part of this conversation anymore. And then also it's probably going to be the best flute battle on a roof you'll ever see in a film. But yeah, it's just...
What?
Oh, it's ridiculous.
There could be.
It has to be seen to be believed.
There could be an entire podcast episode just on Piper, and I'd listen to it.
Oh yeah.
And then watch the film again.
I'm going to do it, don't worry. But yeah, that's the only highlight of me for Sunday films, as I didn't see any others.
Divisive, though. I've heard some people hated Piper.
Oh, they're wrong.
I gave it 0.5 star. It was the best film I've ever seen in my life. It was absolutely fucking terrible, and I'd watch it 10 times over.
It was one of them. It was so bad, it sort of came back round to being just fantastic again. But it revelled in its ridiculousness, I think. I don't know how much it thought it was a serious film. Maybe it did, and maybe I'm saying this, and the director would be very upset in me thinking they deliberately made something ridiculous. But it is so ridiculous. It's fun, and I think the audience really made it. I mean, me and Amber watched it in the press screen where everyone was quite quiet, but people came out of the main screen rolling about laughing. They'd had the best time.
Yeah, I wish we'd seen it in the biggest, because me and Becky like had to tap out. We had enough. Because when you're in like the press screen with they're not the biggest screen, and it was really quiet, and we were the only people laughing in there. We were like, "This is so bad, we have to leave." And then we got out, and everyone was like, "Oh, that was the best flute battle on a roof I've ever seen." We were like, "Shit, can we go back in?"
So highlights Sunday then, Amber.
So I can't say anything else about Piper. It's Criterion, like Piper 2 when. But I thought Sunday was my best or strongest day. I thought after Saturday I didn't enjoy my last two of Saturday, but I was in the main screen for most of Sunday because we had an extra seat, so I got to go in there. So did Piper, and then after that was The Seeding, which was a very bleak, again, very vicious and nasty film that deals with a lot of topics about gender norms and kind of like, I guess, sorry, I'm really blanking. Can you edit this out while I think of the word? What word am I trying to think of here? Reproductive rights. That's what I'm thinking of. Reproductive rights and like the barriers that gender roles cause. And I think it was really nasty. It could have gone a little bit further for me, but that's probably just reflection on me as a person and things that I want to see in films, which aren't necessarily the things that everyone wants to see. But I did think it was really good. And then absolute biggest highlight of Sunday for me has to be Raging Grace by Paris Zarkila. It was just, I mean, I wasn't in any other screening that got a standing ovation, so I don't know how many of them did, but Raging Grace really felt like witnessing something very important, and I'm really like lucky that I got to be there, very privileged.
That's about the, as far as I know, the immigrant experience of a nanny sort of character, isn't it?
Yeah,
There's a lot
so
of these
it's
movies
about
that have been popping up.
a Filipino immigrant in the UK and her young daughter, and it's kind of about how them getting the mum gets a new job for an elderly man in a house, and it kind of spirals from there. But what I really loved about it is that it blended so many genres. It was really funny at times. It was very sweet. It was scary at moments. It was really heartwarming, and it had, I know Where the Devil Roams gave us the biggest what the fuck moment ending of the year, but I thought Raging Grace's ending was just, it ends with this this Filipino choir called the Haraya Choir, and they're all made up of NHS workers like in the UK, and they just put on this beautiful traditional like Filipino performance, and everyone was in tears, like weeping the whole way through. It was absolutely gorgeous. Really, really lovely film.
From what I've heard, that seems to be the, how to word this, not breakout, but sort of the movie that everybody's talking about as far as this year's Frightfest.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
was very like, because this was my first Frightfest, and I have to say, as much as I really enjoyed everything, I was waiting for that moment, that moment everyone's like, this is what Frightfest is about, like film fans coming together. And that was it, like that screening and Paris's speech at the end where he talked about the racism that the Asian community had faced during COVID and the rage that he took from that, as seeing his community and his people be disrespected, and he put it all into this film, and it's just amazing. It was just like a really lovely experience, and yeah, standing ovation. So many people were lining up to meet him at the end. I would not be surprised if he like fully blows up after this. Like, he's one to watch for sure.
Anything else on the Sunday?
Can't remember what else is. Cold Meat I thought was quite interesting. That was like a little single location thriller in a car. But I think for me, after Raging Grace, I was in such a good mood that I like tapped out early because I really wanted to like keep that that positive energy going. And I'm glad I did, because I think if I had gone out after that, I would have been in a bad mood.
So Kat, Sunday.
So yeah, I guess what other people have said. Raging Grace. So standing ovations at Frightfest. I believe this is the third in 24 years.
Oh my god!
I can't remember which the first. I can't remember what the first one was, but the second one was when Adam Green bought Victor Crowley, which he had been making with George Romero, and then Romero died, and then it was like he dedicated it to him, and the audience, gave him a big standing ovation. So I think, if I'm right, this is only the third standing ovation in Frightfest history, which does make it special. And I mean, it was special before it even screened. I mean, I know it screened at Fantasia, but I don't remember there being too much buzz about it. But this was obviously, Paris is from the UK, so this was the home turf screening, and they did the media wall before they did the screening, and I was an emotional wreck because they wheeled out this 10-year-old actress, and unlike Becky, I didn't have my daughter, that she came to see me a couple of times, but she wasn't with me, and I just saw her mum taking pictures of her on the media wall, and I was obviously very proud, and I could feel how that was. So I was instantly burst into tears, and I was like, well, it's okay, because like she's really young, she's just going to do pictures. And then she was placed in front of me, and I had to interview her through tears. So I'm very sorry, Jaden, if I traumatized you. I was the lady who was crying as she was asking you questions. But like, what a star. Like, she spoke so eloquently on the media wall, and she gives a great performance, because the whole thing with her character is that her mum is having to sneak her into all these places, because she's scared that as a mother and an immigrant, no one's going to want to hire her because she's got nowhere else for the child to go. So she's sort of sneaking this child into everywhere. And as somebody that grew up in a single parent family, I'm not an immigrant, but as somebody that grew up in a single parent family, I could relate to certain aspects of her character. And then, in a complete tonal shift, my other highlight is the seeding. Again, I caught it at an earlier festival, and I just remember watching the screener being like, this is just bleak. This is amazing. It's like a really warped version of Wendy and the Lost Boys from Peter Pan. Yeah. So it's like this guy's like, he gets tricked into going into this like canyon in the desert, and he gets like trapped in there, and there's these like boys at the top of the cliff who are sort of keeping him there, and he's staying with this woman, and she very much is the Wendy to their Lost Boys. And I just loved every minute of it. It really highlights the brutal like sort of futility of human nature. And it's very much not for everybody, but it was definitely for me. And I have to give a shout out to the lead actor, Scott Hayes, who had he's a SAG actor, and he had his appearance cleared through like all the waiver system that's going on with the strikes. And he rocked up to the screening with a baseball cap, which he had painted human, not AI on, which I think, given the climate of the strikes, is it was a genius move from him, especially as Frightfest was headline sponsored by Pigeon Shrine, who have dealings with AI as well. It's a nice sort of double thing.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those few movies just show that the stereotype of horror movies is just so, especially with Raging Grace, people think horror movies are just dumb gore and crap. But to have movies that really capture a mood of a time and a mood of a people like Raging Grace, it just...
For sure. The horror from Raging Grace, well, I mean, there are a few scary scenes in it, but the horror from Raging Grace comes from like the very real reality that people in this country, not just in this country, but across the world, what people of color and immigrants face. And I said to Paris afterwards is that I mean, I'm sure I can speak for a lot of people who might be in privileged situations like myself, where I've never experienced that. I'm very lucky not to have. But he put something on screen that I would never have had the chance to see. And it's so eye-opening, because it really does happen to people in, the country that we think is so progressive and so forward thinking. And half the time is really very not so much. So yeah, fully scary in a very realistic way.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that Sunday went from like camp OTT horror of Piper into bleak, the seeding, into emotional devastation, that just shows that horror is so much more than just a woman running through the woods with the top off being chased by somebody with a machete.
100%. Yeah.
I imagine there was a lot of that at Frightfest, though. It seems to have that crowd of movies. Or is it better this year?
Creeping fucking death. That is...
Is that a thinly veiled stab?
It's not thinly at all. No, this is a very outwardly stab against this film that was forced on my eyes, because it should not have been a fucking main screen film. Sorry, I'm not holding back. But
go for it.
Yeah, no, just you could tell that this was very much a film where the director has watched a certain type of popular horror film and was just like, I want to recreate the type of scenes that I enjoyed watching when I was like a horny teenager. And like, it's done terribly, like absolutely terribly. And also it's like offensive to the entire country of Ireland alone. So I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah, the only other ones which would fit in with like that brand of horror would be potentially Punch, but it's sort of a British spin on it. There's a house party and there's naked people dancing at a table. I've never been to a house party like that with college students, but It's a Wrap. It's a Wrap is like a giallo slasher mashup and features some of the best lines at the festival, and by best I mean they're absolutely fucking terrible. In a bid to seduce a man, one woman she tells the man that she's marinating.
What?
Yeah, he's like, "Are you ready for me?" And she's like, "I'm marinating."
A man wrote this, didn't he? A man wrote.
Yeah, of course
oh,
he did.
Jesus Christ! A man who's never spoken to a woman or had no. Okay, no. That's things that women don't say. Jesus, wow.
I imagine the writer also has a podcast. That's the vibe I'm getting there.
What a dick.
That's not a thinly deal stamp myself, by the way. There's like a type of podcaster who's very, well, that, basically.
100%.
Yeah. I imagine the answer's going to be the same here, because it seems like the sort of unanimous opinion on Raging Grace is a very, very high one. But any other Sunday highlights for yourself, Becky?
Yeah, no, I was same as Belle. I left on the Sunday just because I had work on the Monday and had my little ones to sort of look after. So I didn't see too much in the screens on the Sunday. Obviously, Piper, Oscar bait of the screens over the weekend. We're going to be hearing a lot about that in the run-up to the awards. But yeah, Raging Grace was definitely my highlight of the day for all the reasons everyone's already mentioned. It was such an emotional film to watch. And I feel like very much like Where the Devil Roams, it felt like we were really being let into sort of a personal thing between the Addams family of how they made it together. With Raging Grace, you could really tell that a lot of Paris's sort of anger and his own experiences of being an immigrant went into the film. And I feel like it dealt with a lot of topics that maybe we'd seen in the news, like obviously to do with like racism towards Asian people, to sort of the fear of deportation, sort of illegal immigration, living under the radar. But it's things that we've sort of seen in headlines but may not understand too much about. And I feel like seeing the horrors of that on screen, I thought was incredibly emotional. There's a scene in it when it's sort of coming towards its culmination that something happens with Grace in it and she's taken away from the house. And when I watched that for the first time, I was just mouth open, shocked, because I didn't expect to see it. But then it is a reality for a lot of immigrants across the world. It's something that I fortunately will never have to come into contact with, hopefully. But it's something that is just a lived every day for so many people. And I thought that, along with the really common horror in the film, was something that was a real shock, I thought, and something that I know did upset a lot of people watching it. And I think it's something that we really need in horror that speaks a truth that a lot of people don't understand and a lot of people will not get to see because we don't report it. We see headlines on things like the Daily Mail, like, oh, all these people coming here on boats. It's sickening, when it's not. It's families looking for a better life. And then through films like Raging Grace, we see why, we see how they're treated, we see what they go through, the subhuman conditions they have to live in.
The only thing I can really... I'm not saying Raging Grace, but the only thing I can really relate that to is His House from a few years ago that Remy Weeks did.
It's very much that. Yeah, it's very, very similar in tone.
Oh, well, you've won me over there because I adored His House.
Yeah, it's one that I would recommend to... I think any horror viewer can get something out of Raging Grace. It is that sort of film. There is something in it for everyone. I think the message in it is so important. So many people need to see it. And to see, like, I can't think of it. Jaden Page, isn't it? Jaden? Oh, I don't want to get her name wrong because she's so great. The young girl who plays Grace in it. I know Kat got to speak to her on the media wall, and she did fantastically. Compared to some of the adult actors that we spoke to over the weekend, she was such a little star.
I think I was really hopeful, and I think it really bodes well for the future and progressivity of horror, that the film that was perhaps the best well received at the fest and got the standing ovation is the one, the film that dealt with issues of racism, was directed by a person of color, isn't just your standard like white guy slasher thing. Like, I was really very pleasantly surprised, and fingers crossed this is the future of horror from now on, because it's about time, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one I wasn't sure how it was going to go down for that reason. Watching it ahead of the festival, I didn't know how it was going to be received. I was so happy, like when you and Liz and Alice and everyone had came out of the screen and said we were all in tears. It was fantastic. It got a standing ovation.
Absolutely
lovely.
Boring.
Can only ask Kat and Amber this. The highlights of Monday.
I only saw one film on Monday because I had to leave, and I started off with Takeshi Kushida's My Mother's Eyes, which was the first film that played, which I very much enjoyed, but I think it was a pretty terrible programming decision to have it at 11 o'clock on a Monday morning right at the end of the festival, because it's a very psychological, sci-fi, subtle, stylish, slow burn. And it does ramp up towards the end there, but for a good hour and a bit, I could definitely feel the audience flagging through no fault of their own, because like I said, it was just a bad programming decision. I think if it had been like an opening night film or kind of like a midweek, it would have, I mean, it went down well. I think people really enjoyed it and the reviews that are coming out are really good, but it would have been nice to see it at a different time. But I have a lot of love for Takeshi Kushida. He's a really nice guy. I got to chat with him a lot at the fest and kind of get to know him. And I really enjoyed his first feature, Woman of the Photographs, which I thought was a really strong debut. He's got a really good eye for color and the meanings. Like Woman of the Photographs was very red, and My Mother's Eyes was very green, and it goes to a place you would never expect. It's completely bonkers at the end in the way that all the best Japanese horrors are. And it's one that I really want to watch again. I'm very excited to see it again.
I've seen that one too. Effectively, like a woman who loses her vision and her daughter's paralyzed from the neck down, and that sounds pretty pedestrian, but where it goes, not really.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because at the Q&A, Takashi Kushida explained that the reason he's so enamored with things like VR and photography is because he doesn't like making eye contact with people, and suddenly everything made sense. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, 100%, I get it now. But yeah,
I don't know how it ranks in sort of the scenes from Frightfest, because I've only seen 6 through screeners, but the scene in that where the daughter talks about being allowed to die,
it was very, very emotionally charged, and there was a lot of times where I was actually quite moved by it, especially that there's a lot about motherhood in there, and kind of like the living on through your family and your mother. And I have a lot of mommy issues, like a lot of people do, so I was quite like moved by a lot of things in that. And yeah, it goes to some pretty wild places. So I was very pleased to see that it got a good reaction. And it deals as well with a lot of scary technology things, which was quite a prevailing theme through this Frightfest, I think. Things like AI in particular, and kind of like the loss of the human identity through a machine. And it also reminded me, I don't know if you've seen New Religion by Keiichi Kondo. It was like that, it's that very kind of like new wave of Japanese horror that's coming in, these are the guys that grew up on the J-horror boom, and now we're seeing them take these themes of technology and apply them to things like VR or, again, AI, things like that. So it's really interesting to see that evolution.
A Cat, anything left from Monday? Any other highlights?
So there's one film that played on Saturday and then got repeated on Monday, which was Graham Hughes's Hostile Dimensions. So Graham directed Death of a Vlogger, which screened, I want to say 2019, which was a found footage film set in his own flat. He is back in his flat, but this time it's a science fiction sort of documentary about 2 women who find a door to other worlds. He again manages to do lo-fi scares that I should have seen coming and didn't, and gave me a heart attack. Honestly, the sheet scare in Death of a Blogger should not work. And when I first saw it, I got actual goosebumps. And like I watched so many of these films, and I was like, I can't believe you've done this. And he got me twice in Hostile Dimensions. So he's in bad books. He knows this. If you like Death of
what I liked about that one though, the characters are just so likable. So very, very down to earth and real and likable.
Yeah. think if you enjoy Death of a Blogger, you're going to really get on with Hostile Dimensions. Another mention would be for Home Sweet Home Where Evil Lives, which is a German one-taker of a pregnant woman who is renovating her fiance's family's bed and breakfast, and it becomes a home invasion, but also a ghost story, and also an occult story, and also a history film. It goes to some really strange places, and the fact it's all in one take just hurts my head. Like, you can understand how easy it is for bigger directors to do something like 1917, which is obviously like several one takers, but for them to be doing it on such an indie level, and I didn't even know it was one take until I went to review it and I did some research into it. I went, oh, but they had a dream sequence. Like, and it is, and then so I rewound it back and watched it, and it's seamless. Yeah, she sort of like, she sits down and then the camera moves across and action happens, and then it sort of like goes up to the sky for like a few seconds, and then it's back to her and she's waking up, and it's like, okay, now that I know it's a one take, I get it, but I did not get that before. And I guess my final film, which I know that others have seen, even though they weren't there in the Monday, is Good Boy.
I loved Good Boy.
Yeah, it's probably the film that everybody was most excited to see. It screened in one of the smaller screens, which was a shame because it would have gone down so well on the main screen. But it's a rom-com thriller.
That's one way to describe it.
Girls, yeah. Struggling student matches with billionaire heir on a dating app. Things are going great until he introduces her to his pet dog, Frank, who is actually a man who has decided to live as a dog. She decides, hey, he's cute, he's got money, let's give this a go, and they go away for the weekend as a three, and it just gets crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a good time. It's a good time all round.
Well, I know you can't excite him anymore because he's a horrible human being, but like, say on Sono, many movies you watch of him, you say he must have a good cocaine dealer. Like some of the movies that he made. But you can't talk about him anymore because he's a scumbag. But that movie seems very similar. Like, yeah, that guy who wrote that.
It was that I liked Good Boy. I wish it had gone as far as a Sion Sono movie. It doesn't, but it was still absolutely fun, very original, very silly, has a guy that looks like a Skarsgård in it, so I was like immediately on board because I'm shallow like that.
Well, there's not 20 of them, so
exactly.
Maybe.
He could have been an extra one.
It's another one where I think the final scene had a lot of people like, what the fuck? Like, it's another one that really ended on a high note. There's been a lot of them at Frightfest this year, which I think is fantastic.
A lot of great endings.
Yes. So, I think I know the answer to this for a good deal of people anyway, but one film of the festival.
I mean, I think I'm safe to say that I think many is going to be Raging Grace, for sure. I think if it plays at any other festivals, it's going to be the same reaction. I
genuinely can't choose. Raging Grace, Suitable Flesh, and River were my hard to beat 3. And I love them all equally. It's like choosing between children, and I won't do that. So
I will, and it's Raging Grace.
Bel and Kat.
Yeah, well, for me, unfortunately, I have massive FOMO again because I flew home on Sunday, which means I did not see Raging Grace, which everyone has raved about. So it's like that's the one film that I know I need to see. But so because I didn't see that, the films of the festival for me, like, I'd say tied equally because like they're so different. I don't think you can compare them. But Suitable Flesh and Farang, they were the two highlights for me. Like, they're the films that I had the best time with in different ways.
Kat.
Yeah, it's always a very hard question because obviously I watched like 50 of them. I don't just watch like the 20 that like regular attendees watch. I watch like 50 of them. I'm gonna try and cheat my way around it, and I'm gonna say that the the filmmakers of the festival, the people that I had the most fun talking to are the Adamses. I've spoken to them before. They're always great. John of New Life and Paris with Raging Grace. And for films, I'm going to go with Farang and The Moor. They were like, I guess, and Suitable Flesh. So yeah, if you take those three films, you basically have my film taste. So like horny, campish, horror, chilling, true crime, devastation, and just like action and men beating men up.
That'd be a hell of a movie if you found one that has all of it.
I know, right? Keep looking, keep looking.
So I guess the question to ask here is, I think two of you, this is your first Frightfest, Bel and
mine as well.
Amber,
I've
isn't
not
it?
been before.
Yeah.
So three. So how was it for the first time attending this event?
Yeah, I really enjoyed
loved
it. It was
it.
very overwhelming because like me and Amber went as press, so we were sort of covering the festival as well. So there was a lot going on. There's a lot of people. The media wall is so busy, and there's a lot to take in as well. Like you want to take in the feel of the festival as well as the films. So there was a lot to fit in, but I really enjoyed it. I found everyone who was there incredibly welcoming. It was a really, really lovely atmosphere. Like I touched on it briefly earlier. I brought my children along to London with me, with my husband. They came to have a look round, and the amount of people that spoke to them and said hello and sort of made them feel welcome really made my time a lot more stress-free, being able to like go out and feed them, not feeling sort of awkward about it, not feeling like they were unwelcome, and it was sort of something you should go and do elsewhere. It was a really, really nice, welcoming atmosphere full of like-minded people who just wanted everyone to have a nice time, which was really, really nice. I wouldn't say it's something that I didn't expect, but I didn't expect it on the level that I witnessed it.
I didn't expect it. I thought, because it is obviously such an institution of UK horror and everyone who goes to it has been going for years, and there are obviously the regulars, I was really, really expecting it to be quite cliquey, and it absolutely 100% was not. Like you said, Becky, everyone was really welcoming, like people who you knew from like Twitter but didn't really know in real life. It was just like you'd been old friends for years, because you take this group of people who have traditionally been misfits, like the horror crowd. We get a lot of shit for liking these horrible films, and a lot of people don't understand it and they think we're creepy or weird, and you get us all in a room, we're just like the sweetest, kindest, most loving people. Not everyone, obviously, of course there are bad eggs, like there are with like any group of people, but in general, I thought it was really, really lovely and just like a really great time. And I can't wait for next year. I can't wait.
Yourself, Bel?
Yeah, no, for me, it was probably one of the best like experiences. Like again, kind of similarly going into it, I was a little bit more like Amber, and that I was kind of like expecting, like, because especially as like for me as like a very visibly queer person, I was expecting this to be kind of very, I don't know, traditional kind of old
backwards
white
hat
man
wearing, sort of bro horror guys.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of expecting, and it wasn't that experience at all. Like everyone was so incredibly welcoming. I think if I had to like say gone as like a solo attendee, my experience would have been very different as opposed to going with like pre-organized group with all of these ghouls, fabulous humans. That's what kind of made the experience for me. Like from the actual like film festival experience itself, like I think I enjoyed the film experience of Soho Festival more because everyone's watching the exact same films and discussing those films after watching it. Whereas with Frightfest, everyone's seeing so many different films, so you're not necessarily having the same type of post-film conversations because everyone's seeing different things. So from the actual like watching films perspective, I think Soho is a more intimate experience, but the social atmosphere, the being welcomed was the highlight, and I'm just like, I'm already looking at accommodation for next year, and I'm doing the 5 days next year as well.
Never been before. It's too expensive for my tastes.
Yeah.
I'm a poor northerner. Let's just call it that.
Collectively, none of us have dared to look at our bank
absolutely
account.
not.
Like,
it's just the Imperial and Greg's.
Like I got paid today, so that's fine. Whatever happened last week, it didn't happen. And
it's a vacation.
Exactly.
You don't look at your bank account after a vacation.
Exactly.
That's the rule.
It's a vacation in London on a bank holiday. The fact that we got out alive is like that's rich enough in my mind.
I was doing really well, mainly because I'm so busy in the media world that I don't have time to eat. I had 2 actual meals the entire 5 days. I was doing really well money-wise. And then I met up with some friends in the casino and we spent an afternoon drinking cocktails, and cocktails in a casino in London are expensive and come with a £3 service charge on each cocktail. So I did look at how much money I spent, and let's say about half is on that afternoon.
You 100% deserve it. I don't know if it to listeners who might not have been at a Fright Fest with Kat before, it is the amount of work she does is unfathomable in the lead up and during the festival.
Kat is Fright Fest.
It blows. Literally, it blows my mind. Like, you deserved all those £300 cocktails as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's I am the anomaly of the press who does everything. So there are some press who cover the films before. There's some press who just go and sit in the press screen. There's some press who just come to do the media wall. Not many of them do the socializing in the evening. It was nice to have people this year in the press who were doing that. But I do the screeners before, the screeners during, the media wall, and all of the socializing. So by the time I return home to my family, I'm just a husk of a person.
But I mean, this is far from your first. I think you've mentioned on Twitter, it's your 13th?
Yeah, so I won tickets. When I lived in Nottingham, I won tickets to a screening of Monsters, and that was my first experience. By the next year, we were living in Essex, so me and my husband went to watch a couple of films. We saw A Lonely Place to Die the first year and R.I.P.D. the second year. So
Wow.
not all quality. And then the next year, I reviewed my first film, which was Starry Eyes, which I adore. And I then went to my editor and was like, can I look after Fright Fest? And he doesn't like horror, so he was like, yeah, have it. And since 2015, I've covered as much as I can. I like these guys, I went on my own the first time, and the community there is so welcoming. I've made some really good friends through the festival. And I think the thing that Fright Fest has that other festivals don't is there's no barrier between talent and attendees, which obviously in some situations is a safeguarding nightmare, especially you've got lots of very attractive actors and actresses, and suddenly there's no big burly security guard to protect these people. But from a fan perspective, so nice to be able to go up to a filmmaker at the end of their film and be like, I really liked that. And then you can go and disappear into like a 2-hour chat about that film, about their influences, about their upbringing. And then you come out the end of the festival having made friends. I know that happened for some of the other guys on the pod here. And yeah, I think that's something that I really enjoy about Fright Fest. I come back at the end of each year with some new filmmaker friends. And then it's really nice when they return. Like last year, there was Eric Penikoff returned. This year, there was the Adamses and Graham Hughes returning. So it's quite nice to see these people again.
Yeah, I mean, you have FOMO for missing out on the Sunday. I've never been, so it's terrible.
Apply as press with the pod. I'm sure that they would be open to it. And then maybe you only have to look at the accommodation.
Yes, which would put me in my overdraft, which is always fun. So I think that about wraps it up. Unless there's anything that anybody else wants to talk about that really stood out from it this year's Fright Fest, for good or not necessarily worse, because I know there's a side of the horror community that doesn't need air. So for better.
Yeah, the only thing that stands out for me, because it's just like I didn't expect it at all to be a thing, and like I don't know why I didn't expect it, but the fact that like didn't matter what time of day, but every day literally parked right outside the Cineworld where like the evangelical kind of Christian people like preaching and singing hymns and like trying to like catch you and convert you to, like, you know, because they view people going to a horror festival as like sinners or something like that. So I just found that very perplexing. Well, yeah, and I fully embraced that. But yeah, I found it so very perplexing. I didn't expect that. That's the only kind of like other thing that was like, oh yeah, that was part of the Frightfest experience. That was weird. But yeah, other than that, it was fantastic.
Yeah, because they literally only turn up that weekend. You go into London outside the Cineworld any other weekend and they're not there. Bank holiday weekend, they come, they've got their leaflets, they've got their banners, they've got their songs, and yeah, they're just set up shop and trying to convert us. Yeah,
like literally, who has the time?
I mean, like Becky, my daughter turned up. She went and had a picture taken on the media wall because she's extra. But I think the scariest thing that she encountered was the people screaming outside about, you know, you're all sinners and stuff. You know, actually in the festival, there, you know, there's posters, people wearing like the goriest of horror t-shirts and stuff, didn't faze her, but the random people stood outside shouting in her face was definitely something that she did
my
not
daughter's
enjoy.
had exactly the same sort of experience, and I think it did have the danger of being incredibly sort of intimidating for a lot of people, but I do think it's a testament of the Frightfest community that people weren't kicking off, people weren't antagonising them, people were just getting on with their day. And so, I mean, maybe it did kick off when I wasn't there, but I didn't see anything. It just sort of went over everyone's head. It didn't really impact people's good time over the weekend, which I think is a good thing. So I think it definitely did. It did have a very antagonistic air about it, standing right outside the cinema, thrusting things in people's face, calling people names. I think it definitely did have the potential to boil over, but didn't.
You kind of make it sound like, I know there's other examples, but the famous one is the nuns outside of cinemas when the Exorcist was showing.
Very much that sort of extraness. Like,
or it just made me think of that Father Ted episode. Down with this
Careful
thing.
now.
Yeah. That's what I pictured. I was just like, they're just ludicrous. It's just ridiculous.
Yes. I think that about wraps it up for Frightfest. This will be a tradition going forward. Nice tradition. So, where we can find people online and you know, things that you're doing currently. Kat.
So I am at Gizmo Shikari on Instagram, Letterboxd and Twitter, and cathughes.bsky.social on Blue Sky, because who knows, maybe that's going to do something. I also have a podcast that's very not horror, Movies with Mummy, with my daughter Aurora, where we talk about whatever she wants to talk about, and it's chaos. And in terms of my writing, I recently made my Arrow blog debut talking about a film called Dinner in America, which I have championed forever, and finally getting to sort of like write down my love for this film was really special. So that's on the Arrow blog, and people can check it out there.
We have to have multiple social medias because apparently Musk wants to turn Twitter into a bank or something.
Wouldn't surprise me.
He can't do it. He can't even keep it as a social media app. How are people going to put their life savings in it? Bullshit.
He's broken.
Loser.
Blood Diamond, Mummy's little boy.
Apartheid Clyde.
Guy. Anyway, yeah. Amber, where can we find yourself online?
Find me at Apartheid Clyde. No, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hornblowfire, and on Blue Sky at Blonde Kaidan. You can see me on the upcoming front cover of Fangoria, where I interviewed the filmmakers from VHS 85. I'm also in the current issue of Fangoria, where I interviewed the VFX team behind Birth Rebirth. And I have something exciting coming soon for Japanese horror fans. I can't really say a lot more about it at this point, but yeah, just keep an eye out. Like weird Japanese films.
Which we do. Well, I do anyway. Bel.
Yeah, so I'm Mix Bel Morrigan across like all the socials. That's Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. I'm also on Blue Sky as well, and in like my bio for all of those is my link tree, which can take you everywhere else. And then I also have a podcast which is Fishnets and Philosophy, where I mostly just kind of chat about genre films through a very queer lens. And I also have an OnlyFans, so hey, pimping my porn. But yeah, so I'm everywhere on the internet.
It's called Uncut for a reason.
Boom!
And,
So you can find me at Bel Becci on Twitter and on Blue Sky. There you can find my portfolio, which takes you to all my freelance writing for places like Metro, Digital Spy, Ghouls Magazine and Moving Pictures Film Club. And I've also got an exciting project coming up, my own podcast that I'm starting. Again, I won't say too much at the moment, but in the next few months that, all being well, should be coming.
keep an eye on all our social places. All of it will be in the description below. But yes, you can find me across all social medias at Uncut Robcast, as well as on Letterboxd under my name, Rob Simpson. And next week it is Sophia Coppola. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.